Hello everyone. Today we are going to start with pharmacology, the autonomic pharmacology. And to understand the autonomic pharmacology, that is the drugs that are affecting your autonomic nervous system, you should know about the basics of the autonomic nervous system, which you have already read in your physiology, but I will just try to recapitulate everything in this video. Okay, so autonomic nervous system, we know it is autonomous, yes, and it has two branches, that is parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Both parasympathetic and the sympathetic, they have antagonist function, or they have the opposite functions. Okay, so first we'll look about the anatomy of the parasympathetic nervous system, because the future lectures will be on the drugs affecting the parasympathetic nervous system. So we'll look after the details of it. Okay, parasympathetic nervous system anatomy. Okay, from where is the nerves that are there in parasympathetic nervous system originating? Okay, so the parasympathetic nervous system is also called craniosacral outflow. Craniosacral means that the neurons are originating from the cranium, that is your brain, and from the sacrum part of your spinal cord. Okay, so where from the cranium? We know that there are nucleus of the cranial nerves. Yeah, various cranial nerves we have: first, second, third, fourth, and so on. Yes, but the parasympathetic division, the parasympathetic neurons are originating from four cranial nerve nuclei. Which cranial nerve? 3, 7, 9, 10. So you should remember these: 3, 7, 9, 10. 3, which nerve? Which nuclei is this? The nuclei of third nerve, oculomotor nerve. Yes. Seventh nerve nuclei. Which nerve is this? This is facial nerve. Ninth nerve nuclei. Which nuclei? Glossopharyngeal. 10th nerve, very famous, vagus. So from the nuclei of this nerve, for example, this is the nuclei, there will be the neurons originating from the nuclei. This is the nuclei, and here is the neuron. This is the head of the neuron, and this is what we call as the axons and the tail part of the neuron. Okay, so these head of the neurons, they are present in these nerves nuclei. Okay, 3, 7, 9, 10. Just remember this counting. Okay, so the neurons that are arising from these nuclei in the, this is CNS. Okay, from the CNS, and these are the nucleus. So the neurons that are arising from these nuclei are called as preganglionic neurons. So this is one preganglionic neuron till here, this is another preganglionic neuron, this is another, and this is another. So these are called as preganglionic neurons. Why do we call it preganglion? Because they form ganglionic synapse here. Synapse means that this neuron, this neuron is going to form synapse with this neuron. Okay, so this is the last part of preganglionic neuron, and it is going to release neurotransmitter on the head of this neuron. So this structure that is called as the ganglion. Ganglion is where the two neurons are there. Okay, the tail of one neuron and the head of the another neuron. Okay, so what neurotransmitter is released in the ganglion? This preganglionic neuron, from its axons, it will release what? It will release acetylcholine as the neurotransmitter, and acetylcholine will act on the receptor that are present on the postganglionic neuron. This is the postganglionic neuron, that is pink one. So on the dendrites of the postganglionic neurons, we have the receptors for the acetylcholine, and the acetylcholine was secreted by the nerve terminals of the preganglionic neurons into this ganglion. The other fact you should remember is that all the neurons that are coming out from the central nervous system, not all, like the parasympathetic neurons and even the sympathetic neurons, all the preganglionic neurons, they secrete acetylcholine. All the preganglionic neurons coming out from the central nervous system, whether it is sympathetic preganglionic or the parasympathetic preganglionic, they are going to secrete acetylcholine, and the receptor for the acetylcholine is called as the nicotinic receptor that are present in the ganglion. So we have main two types of nicotinic receptors. The nicotinic receptor that are present in the ganglion, they are called as N type of nicotinic receptors. Okay, so from here, when the acetylcholine will be released on these postganglionic neurons, so these postganglionic neurons will now send the impulses to the effector organs, and the effector organs will produce an effect. Okay, so these effector organs, for example, this postganglionic neurons, so this is the postganglionic neuron, nerve ending of the postganglionic neuron. It is also secreting acetylcholine on the receptors, that is called effector organ. The receptors are present on effector organs, and these receptors are called as muscarinic receptor, that I have denoted by the M. Various postganglionic neurons are innervating the various organs. For example, the postganglionic neuron that came from this ganglion, it is innervating mainly eye and the structures of the eye. For example, lacrimal gland. So when the lacrimal gland having the muscarinic receptor, yes, and the lacrimal gland having the muscarinic receptor, when the acetylcholine will be released on that receptor by the postganglionic neuron, it will cause lacrimation. So this is one of the function of the parasympathetic nervous system, lacrimation. Same, the salivation will be there when the postganglionic neuron will innervate the salivary gland, that is the parotid gland, submandibular gland. So these glands have all muscarinic receptors, and when they are innervated, so the effects will be produced. Let us summarize what can be the effects produced by the innervation of the postganglionic neurons in the various organs. In eye, the parasympathetic division of the nervous system in eye, it causes what? Constriction of the pupil. Constriction of the pupil. Why we are saying constriction of the pupil? Because parasympathetic nervous system is activated when you are in the state of rest. Yes, in the state of rest, you are lying down on your bed and you don't want to focus your vision on some far object, so your vision is accommodated for the near object. Yes, so the lens is accommodated for the near vision, and there is no need for your pupil to dilate. You don't want extra light to come inside your eye, and you don't want to see any distant object, so the pupil is constricted, the lens is accommodated for the near vision. That is the effect on eye. And the parasympathetic outflow to the heart, what is the effect on the heart? On the heart, it will cause the diminishing or the decreased contraction of the heart and decreased heart rate. Similarly, what will be the effect of parasympathetic division on the bronchioles? It will cause the constriction of the bronchioles, because you don't have any emergency so that your bronchioles should remain relaxed and the air should come in. Even if your bronchioles are constricted, it's okay, because you are in the state of relaxation, so bronchoconstriction occurs. Yes, so that is the effect. And what is the effect on the GIT smooth muscle? Yes, the parasympathetic division on the GIT smooth muscle causes more peristalsis, because you are in the state of rest. You want to digest your food that you have eaten, and the secretions, the enzymatic secretion, the acid secretion in your stomach and other part of the GIT, the various enzymes that are secreted, all the enzymatic secretions goes up in the parasympathetic outflow when these postganglionic neurons innervate the parasympathetic organs having the muscarinic receptors. Okay, and what about the penis? The erection of the penis is mediated by the parasympathetic system, and the metabolism, for example, the liver, the adipocytes and all, they do not have the parasympathetic muscarinic receptor. They have sympathetic receptors. Okay, so let us again recapitulate it everything. So these postganglionic neurons, they have receptors on various organs, and the acetylcholine that is secreted by the postganglionic nerve endings, the acetylcholine act on the muscarinic receptor that are present on the various system and produces the effect. Okay, then we have different type of muscarinic receptors. Okay, you should remember the types of muscarinic receptor, and if you are capable enough, you should know that which muscarinic receptor is present on which organ specially. So we have five type of muscarinic receptor: M1, M3, M5, M2, M4. Okay, so these are five type of muscarinic receptors from 1 to 5. So M1, M3, M5, these all three are the stimulatory type of muscarinic receptor. What do you mean by stimulatory muscarinic receptor? That this is the, for example, stimulatory muscarinic receptor, this is the cell, okay, and acetylcholine will be released on the stimulatory muscarinic receptor, and it will cause the stimulatory signals to go inside the cell and will lead to the phosphorylation of some enzymes or some proteins inside the cell. Okay, so where are the stimulatory muscarinic receptor present? Let us take example. It is present on gastric tissue, gastric mucosal glands. M1 type of muscarinic receptor. M1 type means that M1 type of receptor is present in your gastric glands. Okay, the acetylcholine that was secreted from the parasympathetic postganglionic fibers on M3 receptors will cause what? Some signals inside the glands, so the glandular cells, and these signals will finally result into upgradation of the enzyme, phosphorylation of the enzyme, which will lead to the secretion of the various enzymes and acid into your GIT for the digestion of food. Okay, so M1 receptor is present in the gastric tissue, and mostly in the CNS also M1 receptor is present. M2 receptor is present on the heart, and M2, as you can see, it is inhibitory type of muscarinic receptor. So acetylcholine released on the heart having M2 receptor will cause inhibitory signals in the cells of the myocardium, and these inhibitory signals in the cells of myocardium will result in less calcium ions coming into your heart tissue, and therefore it decreases the force of contraction of your heart. So M2 receptor are present on your heart. M3 receptor, so M3 receptor, what type of receptor it is? It is again stimulatory type of receptor. Stimulatory receptor means it will stimulate the peristalsis, it will stimulate the contraction of the smooth muscle of your GIT, and it will propel the food towards intestine and the large intestine from your stomach. So it will stimulate the peristalsis. So it should be remembered which type of muscarinic receptor are stimulatory and which type of muscarinic receptor are inhibitory and where they are present. Okay, the other type of receptor I will like to talk about is the receptor that are present on your skeletal muscles. See, skeletal muscles are receiving the innervation from the various skeletal nerves that leads to the contraction of the skeletal muscles. So these nerves have what type of neuron? They have somatic neuron. Somatic neurons secrete what? Acetylcholine on the receptors that are present on your muscle. So this is my muscle, and what type of receptor is present on my muscle? It is NM type, nicotinic receptor of the muscle, NM type. And what is the ligand for this receptor? The ligand is again acetylcholine. So acetylcholine have a major part for the contraction of your muscle. This is the neurotransmitter that is very much responsible for contraction of your skeletal muscles. So this is what we have about the parasympathetic division. What is the significance of knowing these receptors? For example, I want to give you some muscle relaxants. You have some surgery and I want your muscle to be relaxed, so I should give a drug that should block NM type of nicotinic receptors for the relaxation of your muscles, but that drug should not affect NN type of nicotinic receptors that are present in the ganglion. I do not want this whole parasympathetic system to shut down, because that's not my purpose. My purpose is only to block this NM type of receptor, nicotinic receptors that are present on your skeletal muscles, and relax your muscles. Similarly, we have sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system, we'll talk about it later, but remember that the sympathetic nervous system, the neurons are coming from the lumbar portion of the spinal cord, that is thoracolumbar outflow it is called as. And similarly they will have a preganglionic neuron and the postganglionic sympathetic neurons. Okay, like this arrangement is there. But you should remember that even the sympathetic outflow, the ganglions have neurotransmitter acetylcholine, and the receptor of the ganglion is nicotinic receptor NN type that is present on the postganglionic neuron. Okay, and the postganglionic neurons that arises from the ganglion in the sympathetic nervous system, they also innervate the various organs that are innervated by the parasympathetic neurons also. Okay, so that if parasympathetic nervous system is innervating eye, there will be some neurons for the sympathetic nervous system also that will be innervating eye, so they will have a balance. The parasympathetic will do what, the contraction of the pupils and accommodation for the near vision if the parasympathetic is activated. But if the sympathetic is activated, the postganglionic neurons of the sympathetic nervous system that are on the eye, it will cause the eye to accommodate for the far vision. Okay, and the lens will be accommodated for the far vision and the pupil will be dilated, not constricted. So this is how the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system is trying to oppose the function of each other and trying to balance the function. At one time one system is going to dominate. So thank you, have a nice day.